We're almost done with VIF and V4, but here's one important addition related to V4, which you have to be aware of since, well, you can see strange bugs if you're not aware of it. Let's say our goal and index here is actually in a paragraph inside of that list item. So it looks like this. Hence, if I master view here, we see it like this. Now let's say besides that, we also have an input here where we can enter some text. And let's also make sure we can actually enter something there, because right now, if I reload and add this, you see whenever I click in there, I also click on the list item and therefore it's removed. We can avoid this by adding a click listener here where we add the stop modifier. You learned about event modifiers before, and this stops propagation, so it makes sure that when we click on the input, the click is only processed there, and this click event on the list item is not triggered. We don't have to specify any code that should be executed if all we want to do is stop the event. So now if I reload, we can master view, click in there and type. But I didn't do that to just show you the stop modifier, even though it's good to know. Instead, let me show you a strange bug that you can experience with that. I will also add finish the course as another goal. And now I will actually type in here something, so in the first goal, and now click on it so that this goal gets deleted. And isn't that strange? Something is still there on the second goal. The first one was deleted, so the new first one is the old second one, and it kept something around. Might look like a cool feature, but it's actually a bug. This might become more obvious if I reload and try this again. Master view, finish the course, and now let's do it the other way around. Let's enter something here in the second goal and remove the first one. Now, finish the course had something in this input field a few seconds ago until we deleted the first goal. Now, the old second goal, finish the course, is the new first goal, but it lost the input which we had in this input field. And this is definitely not what you want. You could argue that this is a niche scenario, but the problem that causes this is actually a bigger one, which can also lead to performance issues if you don't fix it properly. The problem here is simple. Vue updates the list when you add and remove items. It renders the list in the real DOM and updates it as required. And it tries to do that such that it optimizes performance. That also means that it reuses DOM elements. So if we have two goals here, two DOM elements, and I delete the first one, Vue will actually not re-render the entire list. It will also not delete the first DOM element and move the second one around. Instead, it basically takes the content of the second element and moves it into the first DOM element. And that explains why, if I enter some text here, that text is lost if I delete the first element. Because the first DOM element is not actually removed. Instead, the content of the second one, and with content I mean the dynamic content, so this part with the curly braces, is moved into the old first DOM element. The input element in the first DOM element is still the old one, because the entire list item is still the old first element. Just the dynamic content was moved around. And that's why we lose the input we had on the second element when the content of the second element moves to the old first element's DOM element. I hope I could make it clear what the problem here is. Now this occurs because Vue reuses elements, which generally is good. But sometimes it needs to be able to tell elements apart. Now the problem is, since they all have the same element, the same DOM element, they are all Li elements, there is no unique identification criteria for every rendered DOM element. Yes, the content is different, But thankfully, Vue is not going ahead and comparing all the content with each other. That would be super performance intensive. Instead, long story short, there is a simple extra attribute, which is a non-default HTML attribute, which you can add on elements on which you also use v-for. And that's the key attribute. The key attribute, I'm going to say it again, is not a default HTML attribute. Instead, it is an attribute understood and detected by Vue. It's optional, but it is a good idea to add it whenever you're using v-for. And actually, you will also later in the course see that there are many scenarios where you must use it. So it's already a good habit to start using it on all items where you're using v-for. And key wants a unique identification criteria for every item it's outputting here. Therefore, we want to bind it to a dynamic value with vbind, or the shorthand, just a colon. And now in here, we need something that uniquely identifies every goal. You might be inclined to say the index does that, because every goal has its own index. But, well, keep in mind that if I have two goals and I delete the first one, the old second one now has index 0. The index doesn't really belong to the goal content. The index is always the same. The first item always has index 0, for example. So the index isn't strictly attached to the element value in the array. So the index is not really a good thing to use here. Instead, in this case, we could use the goal text itself. Of course, we could enter the same goal text more than once here, but let's assume that's not the case. Then goal is good. More realistic examples would be IDs that you might, for example, already have in your database. And you will see later in the course, once we also talk to a backend and to a database, that in most cases you do have a unique ID. So getting such a unique key per list item in reality isn't too difficult. But here I'll simply use the goal text. And if I now reload and enter finish the course and master Vue, you will see that if I type something here in the second goal and I then delete the first one, now the input moved together with the second one. Because now Vue was able to tell the different DOM elements apart and detect that the first DOM element now needs to be removed in order to not lose any data attached to the second element. And that was a very thorough and long explanation with a lot of behind the scenes stuff. If there's one key takeaway, again, no pun intended, it is that you should add such a key with a unique identification criteria when you're using v-for. You should add it to help Vue tell the different elements apart and make sure that state, like such an entered value, is not getting lost, and also to help Vue behind the scenes do more performance optimizations.